Hello and welcome to Adapt with Danette FM. My name is Danette Fenton-Menzies and welcome to Season 2 where we're talking about collaboration and problem solving. And today's guest is Dr Selena Fisk, and I'd like to welcome into our conversation Jez FM.
Hello everybody, and yes, we'll be talking about Selena Fisk and this amazing topic today, which is going to be how to use data to build team buy-in, which is very fascinating. And Selena's got an amazing way of sort of sifting through data to really give us some interesting insights. But before we get to that, we've got to mention that the podcast today is a companion podcast to the amazing book, The Adaptable Leader, 7 Skills to Help You Succeed During Uncertainty by Danette Fenton-Menzies, aka Danette FM, the person who is running the Adapt conversations here. So, Danette, very excited to talk about this one. Did you want to talk to us about how you first met Dr. Selena Fisk?
Yeah. So a number of our guests come from a group that I belong to called Thought Leaders, and I was really blessed last year to go to Fiji with this group and hang out with Dr. Selena Fisk, and we had the best time, not only in the classrooms, but also just having conversations by the pool. We share a love of numbers, and what I love about Selena is her ability to create really good insights through her data storytelling.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting. I also have a connection to Selena because I helped her sort of discuss doing podcasting stuff earlier in the year. So I actually met Selena somewhat independent of you, I just without you actually being in the same space. And I thought Selena was awesome.
Yes.
And I think also there's parts of this conversation that I've edited out, which is towards the end. Selena was just trying to work out where to direct people. And it's so fascinating because she actually directs people to different resources that are unrelated to her at all. I guess she wasn't necessarily maybe thinking of that question. So she had a little bit of time to think about it. But I think it just sort of goes to what she is as a person, which is someone who wants to help people, who wants to share useful resources. And so, yes, I've cut out the bit of her thinking about it, but she ends up going with other people's stuff, which I just think is such an interesting way to approach that. And I loved that decision for her.
And it's so how she is as well, how she shows up every day.
Well, Danette, did you have any final things before we send people into this conversation you had with her?
Yeah, just a couple of things that she shared in the podcast. One was around 2 questions to ask when you're looking at data. So the first one was, why am I looking at the data? And really it's around what are the trends and the insights that you're seeing. And the second one was, what are the actions based on what we see from that data? So there's some really good things we can do around collaboration when we're looking at the data, and then for problem solving, the actions that we need to take. I also really wanted to highlight, she gave an example of poor collaboration where basically someone will just dump the data on people and just say, this is what you have to do. And they don't give them the time to digest that data and create insights. And the thing about when we give people the data and we let them explore it, and they come to their own insights, they get their ahas, and they're more likely to own what needs to happen moving forward. So I found those 2 points really, really super helpful.
Amazing. Well, I think let's just jump right into it. So everybody, here is Danette's conversation with Dr. Selena Fisk.
Hello and welcome to the Adapt with Danette FM podcast. This is season 2 and we're discussing collaboration and problem solving. And today I have a wonderful guest, Dr. Selena Fisk, and I'm going to get Selena to introduce herself before we start with the questions. Over to you, Selena.
Hey, Danette. Thanks so much for having me. I'm a data storyteller and a grounded researcher. So what that means is that I get to help people tell more effective data stories and help them use their data more effectively. And the fact that I'm a grounded researcher means that because data is an evolving space and things are changing at such a kind of remarkable rate, I'm learning every day that I go into different organizations and work with new people. And so my understanding of good practice is continuing to evolve as we learn more and do more. So it's I reckon it's the best job in the world, just quietly.
You and me. I love my job. You love your job. How good is it to riff on a podcast?
I'm very lucky to love what we do. Yeah.
So I'll start with our first question, and it's, what have you seen or experienced that's helped you or helps you with collaboration and or problem solving?
Yeah, so just before obviously we hit record, I kind of mentioned to you that I actually see the use of data being both, like when it's done really well, it's both collaborative and people are engaging in problem solving. And the reason for that, I guess, is what we know about data is that historically it was a handful of people's jobs in the organization. And now we're recording this in 2024, that's changed significantly. And it's now become more people's jobs, and it's in many people's kind of role descriptions and areas of responsibility. And we also have a lot of people who are in that position, but they don't have the skills. So actually, rather than having kind of somebody who is the font of all knowledge or somebody who does the analysis and then produces a report for people, we actually now are kind of having to see teams and people work together and collaborate to go, for starters, how do we actually wrap our head around all of this information, and what do we do with it? And so there's kind of two ways you can engage in data storytelling. So one's to an audience. So sometimes, you tell a data story to a board or to a group of people that you're trying to motivate or inspire. But most of our use of data happens in the day-to-day. And I guess I'm guided by two questions in that work. So my first question is always, when we're looking at data, what are the trends and insights that I see? And then the second one is, well, what are the actions? And collaboration and problem solving comes into both of those questions. So if I'm looking at data and I'm thinking about trends and insights in the data, it's important to recognize that my perspectives are important and they're my perspectives, but equally, I'm hugely influenced by my background, my biases, my culture, my experiences, all of those things. And so, it's the Maya Angelou quote, we see the world as it is, not as we are. And so actually we need collaboration. We need people riffing with us on data to be able to go, like, I could come to you, Danette, and go, hey, these are the kind of top 3 things that I saw that I reckon are most important. And you go, oh, actually, I thought that these things were more important. And so it's that ability to collaborate and have conversations about data and get different voices to the table, where we actually get the most rich data conversations. The problem solving piece really comes into the actions. Like then what do we do with that trend or insight? Like if we see something that's really kind of something we want to do something about, we need to be able to brainstorm and think kind of quite divergently, and ideally with members of a team, to work out what that solution or what that action should be and could be. Because again, like often the first thing we see or the first thing we think of, it's the first thing we see or think of. It's not necessarily the best thing. So we need to take the time and slow down our thinking and tap into other brains to really to do it well.
Love that answer. And I just see it so many times where people just go, well, this is what I see, and they ignore others. And as you know, I love numbers. I'm such a nerd like you. and yet without taking that time to gather other people's perspectives and insights, there could be blind spots we're missing because we're trying to rush it, for argument's sake, and all the biases with that. So love that answer. All right, let's go to the next one. Could you share an example of poor collaboration and or problem solving, and particularly what were the impacts when people didn't go through the process you just spoke about?
I reckon quite a few people who are listening to your podcast can think of an example of where a leader got up and shared some data with them, and it was an event. It was a one-way transmission of information. I tell you what I see, I tell you what you need to do, and I leave. And so in that instance, there's absolutely no collaboration. We're completely relying on the person who's communicating that insight as if, they have got it right, and maybe they have in terms of identifying what's going on. But they've not tapped into anybody else to think about what it means for the company, what it means for clients, what it means for the people they're there to serve. And they've possibly not thought about, well, how do we actually problem solve a solution for this? Now, I've been in that situation quite a few times, and I know what it did for me, and I see it now happening in cultures where data is dumped on people. For starters, people don't have buy-in to the process. We know that, and there's some really interesting stuff with the use of data, where when I always talk about, we look for trends and insights, and trends are patterns and things we expect. So if your financial position is kind of being maintained. That's a trend or a pattern, right? Like you just expect it. But an insight is something that shifts a perspective, and it's the light bulb or the aha moment. So I got a notification this morning that I've spent $1,500 on shipping in my company this month, right? Yeah, I just saw the look on your face. That was an insight for me, right? Because I remember it. It was significantly different to what I would expect. Now, I'm kind of jumping around a bit, but when we just dump data on people, we don't necessarily give them the opportunity to have those insights. They don't necessarily have the aha moment, the light bulb moment. We're telling them what the aha moment should be. And the problem with that is that we actually take away from the member of the audience that opportunity to have that revelation for themselves. And therefore, they're actually less likely to act, because those aha moments are the things that often are the motivating factor. Like, I'll go and have a conversation with my practice manager now about the $1,500 that we've spent on shipping this month. And I'm going to do something about that because it was so different to something that I expected. And so as leaders, as anybody talking about data with other people, we've actually got to manufacture the opportunities for them to have that insight moment. And that comes through collaboration. And riffing back and forward. There's no harm in getting up and sharing some of those key insights, but we need to hand back over to our people and say, well, what do you see? What do you think? And then again, going back to the problem solving, now that we know all of those things, what's our biggest priority, and how do we actually address these things, and how do we move forward together? Because otherwise, people do things because of compliance, not passion. They may or may not complete what you're asking them to do because they don't actually understand the purpose. And so, yeah, by bringing them into the collaboration and problem solving kind of process, you're massively increasing their engagement and their buy-in and their interest in the actual change process to begin with. So I've seen loads of great examples, and I'm sure you've got many in your work as well, Danette, where you've seen that done really, really well, and then you've seen it done really poorly, and people are told what to do, and employees just inevitably tap out.
Great answer, and absolutely have seen many good and many not so good examples as well. And I love that aha bit, because I often talk, when I'm talking about sort of data storytelling, I go, the data informs us, but it's the storytelling that is really what changes the behaviour. So allowing people to tell their story in their head about that insight is like, bang, oh yeah, now I know why I need to do something. So I really like the way you phrased that too. So thank you for that.
It's meaning making, isn't it, for the user? When you see something that's insightful, it's insightful to you because of the meaning you're putting on that particular metric. And we can't make that up for people.
Yeah, totally.
We can't meaning make for them.
Love that. All right, let's go to question number 3. This was a question that Jez added to, and I really like this, and it was based on your experience. What tips do you have for others, including young people who might be just starting out in their career, and others as well, around developing their problem-solving and collaboration skills?
Yeah, it's a really big question. One of the things I really like, and I use it in my data storytelling workshops, is the design thinking double diamond model. And it's increasingly—
Tell us more.
Yeah, so originally the first version of the design thinking model was that what a designer does is that when they're presented with a problem, they diverge thinking to think about a solution, and then once they've kind of done all the exploration, they then converge on the solution for the person. And then the British Design Council, I think in 2005, doubled the diamond. So there's now 2 diamonds side by side, and that's kind of more the accepted version of it. Because now the perception is, if you come to me with a problem, I diverge to think about, well, I want to learn more about the problem. And then I converge on finding, well, what's the main kind of challenge, I guess, like what are the main pain points? And then we diamond again. So then we diverge and go, okay, well, what are the possible solutions? What options do I have? And then through that kind of decision making and exploration, we're then able to make a good decision about, actually, well, this is a really good option or outcome if we kind of take this path. So it's diverge, converge, diverge, converge. And I really like that as a frame for thinking about what is possible and what's going on because, our brains have a real action bias. And I'm sure on this podcast, you've talked about system 1, system 2 thinking from Kahneman's work, thinking fast and slow. I'm sure you've talked about that a lot, because the problem is that we're so often quick to identify something and then think, and because of an action bias, we then think about what we do, but we could have actually missed something that was more important. So I encourage people to really think about how they can create opportunities for themselves, just sit in that unknowing of the diverge section. When I work with leaders, it's funny because, as you know, Danette, I used to be a high school teacher, and curiosity, like people say that curiosity has just been beaten out of students, right? And it's something that schools, I think, can get better at doing. And there's a misconception that we help people be curious by giving them lots of time and space, which we can absolutely do. But people, when they don't give themselves that opportunity, we can actually scaffold it for them. We can actually kind of step them through a process and get them to think about what all of those possible options could be. So one of my favorite examples that's in one of my books, I'm Not a Numbers Person, is that I get people to do a 3 by 4.
Which is on my bookshelf, by the way, and it's a great book. I have read the entire book, so thank you.
Oh, thanks, Danette. That's lovely. One of the things I get people to do, if you're trying to think divergently and think about kind of what's possible, what possible solutions could be, like how we address this problem, whatever it might be, 3 by 3 grid, like a bingo grid, and fill all 9 boxes with possible actions. Because what I know happens in my system 1 brain, because Daniel Kahneman's research found that 98% of the time we're thinking in system 1, I can write in, say, 4 or 5 boxes worth of actions, and I can smash them out really quickly. And then I almost like hit a brick wall, and I can almost feel in my body like this like slowing of the cog, like, nope, and that's it, like 4 or 5 options. And when I do this with other people, I sit there and I say, no, we're not continuing until you've filled all 9 boxes. And in my brain, I can almost feel this like physical gear shift into, okay, hang on, what would somebody else suggest? What have I seen elsewhere? If I was a 21-year-old person walking into this who'd never heard anything about it before, what might they suggest? And kind of consider those different avatars. And we've got to, like, it's funny because providing that scaffold actually encourages curiosity, which is it's a really kind of weird paradox. But I think if we're doing this for ourselves or for other people, I guess my point is, how do we construct those opportunities, whether it's time and space, whether it's lists, whether it's boxes, to tap into that idea from the double diamond to really be in that divergent phase of what is possible, because then the decisions we make on the other side when we start to converge are going to be better. They're going to be more accurate.
I love that. And I was once taught, if you run out of ideas, to cross your arms the opposite way to how you normally do. And it switches your brain over, so it then gets really creative. So if they really get stuck, try that one with them as well.
I don't even know that I can.
I know, it feels so weird, but it brings in a bit more of the creative side, and it's fascinating, but it works. And just go, what else? And people are like, oh, this and this. So it's a great one.
Yeah, I like that.
And I love the grid bit. Like, that's such a simple thing that people can take away and go, okay, if I stop at 4, that doesn't mean I stop. I'm just slowing it down to come up and asking and I love the questions you're asking to get those different perspectives. Like, what about an 18-year-old, etc. Because that sort of really helps people think outside of the box that they normally think. And not everyone is aware that their perspective is unique. I've had leaders in groups going, no, doesn't everyone see the world this way? And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
So even that's really helpful. All right, let's go.
Yeah, and if you've got multiple people in a group, like back to the collaboration piece, I actually really like getting, I've had leaders before where every leader goes away quietly and does their own 3 by 3 grid, and then they all share back. And like, oh, I never thought about that. And and then there's a really great opportunity for collaboration and conversation about what ended up in the 9 boxes as well.
All right, let's go to question number 4, which is, what's your favourite example of problem solving and or collaboration, and why?
This is a really hard question because I was saying to you before we hit record, do you want an example of, something that's happened in history or something in my own practice? The example I'm going to share with you is actually one for me. It was in my practice, but I'm sharing it for a reason, because what I saw was true collaboration that was interdisciplinary. So I had an opportunity last year, really, really privileged to be able to go and speak in a keynote I did a keynote at Brown University in America. And it was the title of the week, there was a week-long program, and the week was about how to tell effective data stories about social justice issues. So they're basically my two biggest passions in life, social justice and data. And I was like, wow, this program could have been written for me. This is absolutely up my alley. And they approached me. I didn't even know it existed until I reached out. But when we got there, I had to choose a group to be in. And each of the groups over the course of the week created a data story about a particular social justice issue. And so there was a group looking at policing in America, for example. There was a group looking at Hispanic speakers' access to healthcare and Hispanic speaking healthcare in America. There was a whole range of other like gender kind of politics and gender equality concerns groups. And I chose to be in the group that was looking at telling data stories about genocide. And it was a really fascinating group of people to be with. And it was actually really interesting when we got together at the beginning, the person who was leading the group, and I felt like this was such an American thing to do as an Aussie. He was like, right, can we just all go around and explain what our strengths are so that we know what we can lean on for other people, like from other people? And I was like, I don't think we would ever do that in Oz, but that's cool because we actually all were able to say what we did and what our strengths were. And so we knew who to go to when we needed something done. But what ended up was that we had a couple of people who were experts in building resilience to genocide and had done a lot of work over decades in research and in Africa directly with leaders and with regions. We had data scientists, machine learning professionals. We had people with maths PhDs from Harvard, Stanford, and Yale. And we had the communications people. So I was there obviously as the data storyteller. And for me, it was just the most brilliant example of collaboration and problem solving because we had data sets all over the internet, all of this open access data. The only remit we had was how do you tell us data story about this particular challenge? And so with all of us, it was just this beautiful riff. And because I think everybody really respected the expertise that the different people brought, and everybody was really open to leaning into their strengths and really upfront. Like there was just actually no ego. So it was kind of like people were saying, oh, look, that's not really my jam. Like I'm not really good at that, but this person's amazing. And what it meant was that we came up with some potential modeling and some very clear data that actually genocide economically impacts an entire region for 20 to 30 years. So there's always been in the research, anecdotally, people have said that generally economies are impacted for up to 3 decades. And we found quantitatively that at least 20 years, but we don't actually have enough long-term data to definitively say up to 30, but at least 20 years worth of impact. And that just came to mind because I was interviewed on something else this morning and I shared that story. But as I say, the thing for me that I keep coming back to was just this interplay of such different strengths and attributes that people brought, real recognition that we didn't have to be able to do it all, that we needed to be able to lean on those people that could do the things that we maybe couldn't. And that was just an awesome outcome as a result. So that project's actually continuing, and they're continuing in Scotland next month. Unfortunately, I can't make it. And then they're getting together again middle of next year. So I'm hoping to be able to make that and continue the work. So yeah, it's power of collaboration across disciplines.
Love that. And I love that idea of let's understand each other's strengths before we even start, to be able to go, that's not me, but hey, that's Selena, she can do that great. That's such a great idea. And I hope you do get there next year as well. That'd be awesome. Wow.
Fingers crossed. Yeah.
All right. My last question is, anything else you'd like to share, including any helpful resources that people might want to access?
I think it's definitely worth going and checking out the British Design Council Double Diamond. That's pretty easy to find online if you're interested in kind of knowing more about that diverge converge piece. Obviously, we've been talking about collaboration and problem solving, but also data storytelling through the lens of data. My go-to for data storytelling is Brent Dykes. He's American. He's got a book called Effective Data Storytelling, and it's just, he does a really good job of weaving in, how we kind of have the narrative, the data, and the visuals. Like, there's not as much in his book about working with members of a team. It's more about presenting to them. But yeah, if data is kind of your thing and you're into it, that would be a really good place to go to read more.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And just a big thank you for coming on the Adapt with Danette FM podcast. Really appreciate it. Give you a big hug.
Big hug to you, Danette. Thanks so much for having me.
Wow, what a great conversation. I think people would have loved Selena's energy off of that one. Danette, did you have any sort of key takeaways from this conversation with Selena?
Good question, Jez. So I really liked where she talked about the 3x3 grid as a way of coming up with different actions. And she based that on the Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow book, where really you're able to help people go fast in some ideas for actions, but then actually really think quite deeply as you start to run out of those fast answers. I really also liked her, and it's not her model, but she referred to the double diamond model, where we diverge and converge both on the problem and also the solutions, again, to think more deeply and richly. Those are two really good key takeaways for me. What about you, Jez?
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I think that what I like about it is it's, even though it is, a diamond is not a million miles away from a square, which would, put people in a box. This technique actually allows people to separate out and sort of all come back, and every idea is essentially kind of similar in its weight, where everybody is looking for any idea that's going to be good. Then how do we sort of pick the best one? So I think doing this gives people more freedom. It's one of these systems where you do need a little trust, because if you don't have trust in your teammates, you would never do this, because you're not interested in what they have to say. So it's a great way to at least throw to your teammates that you are interested. And I think the other one for me that was really interesting was her tying together how important collaboration is and buy-in to a team is, because you may think of those two things as different things. Like if everybody's on the same mission, we're all always heading in the same direction, but bringing in that collaboration piece, if your team isn't bought in, that's at least something to try and throw out there as something that may join people together, which I thought was a really good insight from Dr. Selena there.
Nice. Yeah, love both of those. So excellent share, Jess.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. Well, let's jump into our question today, our listener question. Now, for everybody, you can send these in to either Spotify. We have a great spot there. Spotify now has commenting, which is a new feature as of last week. So feel free to put in a comment. We also have an area for any questions or insights you wanted to take away, and that's a great spot to put questions in. We also, on our YouTube page, which I mentioned in our last episode, we have episodes going up at midday on Thursdays, and we have a premiere where you can watch it live. But if you go there at that time, you can also jot down questions, or you can jot down those questions at any point on the Danette FM YouTube page, which is going fantastically at the moment.
Nice.
So anyway, that is to say, people can send in questions, and we've got one today from Emma. So I just wanted to throw this one to you, Danette. So Danette, Emma is asking, I recently started at a new job and the culture is quite individualistic. I'm used to a more collaborative environment and I'm struggling to introduce it to this business. People are more interested in just completing their tasks and tend to avoid talking to each other in our business Slack when they have problems. It isn't a problem at the moment for the business, but I am worried about in the future, in case we need to collaborate more. How do I get my team to buy in a bit more? Thank you, Emma.
Oh, I love that question, Emma. And what an interesting culture. So when you see lots of individualism, looking at things like what are we rewarded for? And maybe there's a bit of competition going on in that organisation. Now, we know that competition used to be the old way of getting the best out of people, but the science has now shown that that actually doesn't work particularly well. It's okay to compete with yourself and get better each day, but competing with one another tends to actually make us perform worse over time rather than better. So I'd be curious. I'd start talking to the team members and asking them, how are you finding this? Could we make this a little bit more where we work together and seek their inputs around stuff? I'd also demonstrate collaboration. So given Emma's come from an organisation where she's seen it work well, actually just bringing in some of those ideas. So probably Emma reflecting on what were the things that were done differently in your old organisation? Not to go, that was better, this is worse, but just here's another idea that maybe we could give a go and see whether this helps us be even better than we already are. And I suppose, at the end of the day, as they start to move to more collaborative approaches, acknowledging that, celebrating that. And I think the last thing I'd say for Emma is she's going to need to lead this. So if people aren't asking or sharing problems on Slack, maybe one of the ways she can start is actually to ask for help. We're hardwired that if someone says, can you help me? In our brain we go, yes. So maybe she can just do it also through demonstration. So they're just some ideas I've got, Jez.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with everything that you said there. And I think that for Emma as well, it's always going to be tricky when you come into a work culture where you sort of stand out in a certain way. So it is going to come with some difficulty. And so this isn't something that she has to try and do every single day. I think this can be something that, when she's got the energy, she should try and do it. But I think talking to the managers and being like, I think this could be helpful. Because, it can be really tricky working in a really isolating environment like that. And so collaboration is always nice. And I think that you're right, Danette. People are hardwired to help in general. But I guess also look at the competitive nature of the business and see, is it too competitive? Are there ways that I can help improve this? Because I think if you can bring collaboration on board, everyone will be more successful. So it's a good project, if nothing else.
Yes. Yeah, totally, Jez. And, at the end of the day, when it's really individualistic, I'd also be looking at things like staff turnover, because what she may be able to do is bring up the collaboration from a point of view of this actually makes people want to stay, makes us more of an employer of choice. So she could also be working with the leadership around maybe it's time to do a bit of tweaking on the culture.
Love it. Well, Danette, did you have any final thoughts on today's conversation with Dr. Selena Fisk and the concept of how to use data to build team buy-in?
I really, really love the idea of getting the diverse perspectives from multiple people around the data rather than just one person looking at the data. And I love the idea of letting people take that data and get their own insights, because that really does change behaviour. So I think while it might be efficient to give, here's the data and here's what I want you to focus on, it's actually way more effective to bring others in, get their divergent viewpoints and let them come up with their own insights. So fabulous conversation. Always love my time when I talk to Selena. So thanks, Jez.
No problem. And I also just wanted to highlight that we are really talking about problem solving and collaboration. If you want more insights, pick up a copy of Danette's book, The Adaptable Leader, because there's 2 chapters that are really going to highlight you the information there in the accepts model. So that's fantastic. So I guess, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And Danette?
Stay adaptable.